As a grounded sci-fi writer, how do you think that AI is going to change society in the next 5 years, 25 years, and 100 years?
In the next 5 years, I think we're looking at some disruptions in certain industries. Like, for instance, right now, they're still kind of working out how AI and AI art is going to be perceived. Like a lot of people say, oh, AI art is bad because it samples, you know, from millions of pieces of art that it sees online, and those creators don't get any credit, they don't get any royalties, they don't get any money, and so there's a big moral issue related to that, and so there'll be that kind of fight. But I think in the end, like the the technology solution that is easier and cheaper for everyone is the one that always wins. So I think over the next 5 years, people will argue about whether or not it's okay to train AI on human-made stuff. And hey, what about me? Do I get credit for that? And then probably within probably within the next 5 years, even 5 to 10 years, that argument is just going to go away. I think people are going to just accept that, okay, AI can train on human art in the same way that humans train on human art. I mean, every artist out there, there's nobody who like learned how to do their craft in a vacuum. They looked at other artists' stuff. So your brain is a neural network. Why do you get to do this, but an artificial neural network doesn't? Eventually, it's going to go away, and it's going to be extremely disruptive to the graphic arts industry because now I don't need to hire an artist to draw something for me as long as it's not something precision or, with legal ramifications. If I just want an image of a crowd cheering for my product or something like that, I can have a computer make that, and then I can own that image, and that's it. And so, as a company, if I was trying to make advertisements or something like that, it sounds a lot better to get those results in 1 second and pay, $10 a month than it is to get those results in, 2 months and pay $5,000. There's just no one thing I'm sure that you know as much as anyone else, or probably more, is that like it, something that makes things cheaper for businesses always ends up taking over. It always ends up being the way things go. And protectionism never works. I mean, now we're getting into like economic theories, and I'm a sci-fi writer, so maybe I shouldn't get too deep into that. But I feel like I think of economics as like a type of physics, and you can imagine money flow as being kind of like energy. It always tries to go to the lowest energy state. So one way or another, the economically wise thing ends up being the socially acceptable thing. And that's been true throughout all history. So even though a lot of artists will get kind of screwed in the short term, I think that that's eventually people are going to stop talking about it, and that issue is going to go away. And then the artists will be, some of them will do human-made art for the purpose of being artistic, and others, the now artists, will be the people who use the AIs to refine and make better-looking images than a layman can. Um, that's what I always say is like for any disruptive technology that puts jobs and careers out of business, it also creates jobs and careers.
Mm.
So, you know, artists might lose their jobs, but then they will be the ones who already have the built-in skill set to understand what looks good and say like, no, 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 I'm going to tell the AI do this instead. No, no, okay, I'm going to give these little tweaks. They'll become, the kind of super users, the people who know how to use an AI to do this stuff. I mean, kind of like in the same vein of like you could do all sorts of amazing things with Photoshop, but you have to have skills. You have to know how to do them. So I think that's what we're going to see in the next 5 years is a transition from those things out. In the next 25 years, I think we're going to see a big tumultuous changes in the entire entertainment industry. Um, my prediction is that the concept of event-based entertainment is going to not go away, but it's going to kind of go the way of horsemanship. It'll be it'll go from something everybody did to something that's kind of a niche interest. Because the notion of like, oh, Avengers Endgame is coming out on such and such a date. We're all going to see it. It's going to make billions in dollars, and everybody's going to love it. Everybody's going to be talking about it. Everybody's going to go, oh, what do you think about this scene, that scene, that scene? It's like an event that happens that affects millions of people, not like a tumultuous event, just an entertainment event. But I think those days are going to go away. I think what's going to happen is eventually you're going to have, we're talking in the 25-year time frame now, we're going to have AIs that can write stories as well as people can. I think that's pretty straightforward. An AI can read a billion books and say like, okay, I understand how stories get put together, and I can write a story that does this or that or the other thing. Then you're also going to get AIs that learn what you are all about. Like, so you'll have on your computer an AI assistant or something like that, just in the same way that your search engine knows like what products you're interested in. This AI will know what you like and don't like in entertainment, what you think, what your opinions are, political, ideological, personal, what things you think are cool and interesting, what things you think are lame and boring based on your viewing activity history. Then you will have on your system, um, it will be able to write a story that you personally will think is awesome. Maybe the guy sitting next to you would think it's lame. Maybe everyone in the world would say, this is a dumb story. I don't understand why anybody would like this, but it doesn't matter. This thing makes a story for you. And then it can also create it as a film. It can create all the imagery, it can create the animation, it can do everything. And so imagine if whatever your favorite movie in the world is, imagine that. And imagine you tell your AI, like, I want to see a sequel to that movie. You know, and maybe your favorite movie in the world is one that was AI generated. And it's like, about purple bunnies on the planet Zorbak, whatever. And like everybody says, like, why do you even like that? And it's like, I don't know. I think it's cool the way the taller purple bunny is like manipulating the whatever, you know. And so eventually, I think entertainment will become a, a very personalized experience. Like you will be you will be watching a movie that was made for you and for no other consumer.
Do you think there'll be societal consequences to having a lack of shared narrative?
Well, people will still communicate about, the real world, but lack of shared narrative, I think what it'll do is it'll actually remove narrative control out of the hands of a few. Like, so right now, the people who make the movies, the people, who create the entertainment can kind of attempt to guide your worldview. And I think we're seeing a lot of that right now. And I try never to do that, but um, ideology and messaging put into storytelling. And it seems like that I think it's kind of an issue in the industry lately, is that messaging is taking a front seat ahead of entertainment and plot development and stuff like that. I try never to have any political messaging in my stuff, but regardless of that, it is definitely there. And this means that you have a small cloistered group of people who live in their own kind of political bubble, and they get to determine the messaging that's happening across the board in both television and film industry, um, just in every way. But that's going to go away when it becomes completely democratized, right? And we've seen that to a smaller extent with, like, for instance, news media, how there used to be just three news networks. You could watch ABC, CBS, or NBC. This is when I was a kid. That's it. Those that was all the news you could watch. But now there are specialist news channels that can cater to the far right, far left, middle left, whatever. And so everybody gravitates toward those news channels that keep them in their own bubble. Um, this is not the case with entertainment. You still have one kind of monolithic entity, mostly Hollywood, where people tend to be fairly like-minded. There's a little bit of disagreement, but they tend to skew left. It happens to be left, but in the 50s, they skewed very far to the right. So it's like whatever Hollywood feels is what you see in all the entertainment that gets created and validated, and that'll just go away. There won't be an arbiter of messaging in entertainment anymore.
And when you think about that, do you have any anxiety over the fact that there won't be this top-down coordinated, this is our value system, everybody, and if you're not on board with this, there's a problem? Do you see any downside to that breaking down?
No, not at all. I think it's great. I'm I'm sort of an evangelist for this, but I feel like or just the way I write and the way I consume entertainment is I just want to be entertained. I don't want to be preached at. I don't want to be told what my morals should be. I don't want to be made to think about anything unless that's the sort of thing that I'm going out of my way to watch. I just want to, I watch entertainment to have fun, to enjoy myself, you know? And if I want the entertainment equivalent of like fast food, then that's what I want. And, I don't want someone, if I go to McDonald's, I don't want them to say like, here's your Big Mac and here's your broccoli. And I'm like, well, I didn't want broccoli. It's like, well, we went ahead and mixed the broccoli in with your Big Mac because it's better for you. I'm like, I don't want what's better for me. I want what I'm going to enjoy. Okay. Stop trying to make things better for me. I came here with a purpose and I want to eat a Big Mac. So I think it's great. I think entertainment should be, in my opinion, about being entertained. I mean, in the end, it's like this is a leisure time activity that you're doing for fun, watching video, watching a movie, reading a book, whatever. And you should get to be the one who decides how much, if any, messaging there is. If you really want it, you can ask your AI, oh, I want an action movie, but I want it to have social overtones about wealth divide. Please include that. Then it will.
So when I look at that, one of the things that I think a lot about is there's a guy named James Burnham who wrote this book called The Machiavellians. And in the book, he puts a lot of things forward, but one of the most important is that the only way to get a large group of people to work together in a flexible manner is to have a shared narrative so that everybody understands what do we as a tribe believe, where are we pointed, and that there's something in the architecture of the human mind that they want to follow somebody. And so when I think through what does the world look like, because I think you're right, that this is all going to be individualized, that everybody's going to be engaging with everything at the level of, this is how I want it. This is how I want my news. I want my news to skew left, or I want my news to skew right. I want to see the things that I already believe to be echoed back to me. And now what you end up with is this massive spectrum. Rather than people falling into these easy camps, you have people all across the spectrum. And so I can't help but go, if for all of human history, we have looked up to the leaders through story, through political maneuvering, they always gave us a direction to move in. And when we wanted opposition, it was like very controlled opposition. It's, the left versus the right. It's a very simplified notion that there's an inevitable sort of scattering of humans, because I think they will still want to tribe up. And as the tribes become increasingly niche, then how do we move forward effectively? And I think that there's going to be an element of chaos that will come from people not having a shared narrative. Now, I'm with you. I don't want it to be forced, but I do see an inevitable cultural fractionating happening due to the way that AI will be so singular in its message delivery.
Interesting. I kind of disagree with you a little bit on that because I think that or rather, I don't disagree with you. I guess I disagree with that book a bit. If you go back to the era before mass communication, we have always had nations. We've always had countries. I mean, we had World War I. We were this vast country. We were the United States, 3,000 miles across, and the fastest form of communication was a letter being delivered by train, right? And we still were a cohesive nation that had core ideologies that we held together. It didn't need a daily reinforcement of narrative control from a centralized source. There wasn't one.
It's interesting. I would say that would make it easier because now whatever becomes the dominant story that's being passed on, which was traditionally via religion gave you the oversimplified story that everybody could get behind. So we are around these parts, we're Christian, we're Catholic, we're Muslim, whatever. But you had sort of the ultimate self-help book that gave you an instruction manual for life, and it got passed on through the churches. And there was nobody that could fight for your opinion. Like the odds that you even heard about an alternative way to view life or an alternative value stack was next to impossible for the reasons that you laid out. So yeah, I think that, again, both of us are obviously just prognosticating, but I feel like knowing what I know about the way the human mind works, it seems inevitable that there will be some sort of second and third order consequence to there not being these really tight shared narratives, which I'll tie to this moment. Part of why people say we live in this post-truth moment is that it is extremely hard to define what is, once you get outside of physics, what is objectively true. Most of it's just human interpretation. And so if most of life is human interpretation, and now that human interpretation of what life is, what it means, what one ought to pursue becomes so individualized, feels like something weird, or at a minimum, something unexpected is going to happen from that, again, just breaking apart into these individual narratives.
Yeah, I mean, I can see what you're saying, but I still have to go back and say that we've lived in that world before. And yes, it's true. There's the overarching ideology and belief system of like Christianity was prevalent all throughout the United States in the 1800s and early 1900s. But people in, people in Maine didn't have a lot of interaction with people in California, right? They didn't they didn't, they didn't interact on a daily basis or on an hourly basis like we do now. So basically, those were two completely isolated societies that had like nothing to do with each other. Now, when you become, I think part of being a nation back then was a smaller list of core ideologies. And for the United States, they're all codified in the Constitution. So that's like the one thing we say, okay, so that document there, that's how we do things here in this whole big country. Um, so you're right, there's that central thing, but it's static. It's not constantly shifting. When you have a group of people in charge of a narrative and those people can change it any way they like, that's when I think the concept of a central narrative control becomes disruptive for society because you have a core group of people that can kind of suddenly change morality. Like we saw this a lot with, I mean, I don't know what people are going to call this era in entertainment. Some people use the word woke a lot. Some people hate it if you say the word woke, but it's going to have some kind of name like the woke era or something like that. And people are going to study it in the future because it's like similar to McCarthyism. Things suddenly changed to the point where something that you said 10 years ago wouldn't have upset or had any effect on anybody. And now if you say that exact same sentence, your entire career will be over and your life will be ruined. So social change at that pace only happens when you have a core small group of people controlling the narrative, I believe. And when those people either suddenly change their mind or those people suddenly change, like they're new people now, um, that that can't happen when you democratize ideology across everybody, each individual computer. You know, if it's your computer is no longer YouTube or the movie industry or something like that is no longer feeding you a narrative. Instead, it's just like, okay, you wanted you wanted a movie that was at least 50% car chases. There you go.
All right, so let me break down, make sure that I understand what you're saying. Tom, the problem historically has been that people can control the narrative, and having that kind of top-down control is deeply problematic. You can sway morality, and the fact that people were not aware of what's going on over here or over here, there was they fell into a bit of a trap in that once somebody gets a hold of that narrative, it's all they know. And so they're going to succumb to that. Now, what we're seeing is sort of the end of that as AI is coming on board. People are going to be unshackled from the top-down narrative control. People are going to be able to, I guess, have freedom of choice in terms of how they begin to structure the narrative under which they live. And you're not seeing any negative second and third order consequences that come from that. Have
I
I
wouldn't say I'm not
understood?
seeing any negatives. I'm just saying I think so far, I think that is, as far as I've taken it in my mind right this second, is that I don't see that it's bad to have the central narrative structure toppled. If you want to talk about second and third order effects, is like, well, we already have with the democratization of communication, thanks to the internet, we have people able to self-sort into niches of ideology and belief, whereas used to be if you didn't believe the moon landing happened, you'd be the only guy in, for 10 city blocks that had that opinion, and people would say you're crazy. But now you can find all the other people who think that way, and you can all hang out together and talk to each other and reinforce your belief system. And you could not do that any other time earlier in history. You could never the the town lunatics couldn't form a town lunatics chat group, with one lunatic per town. It didn't work that way. So now they can. So there's all the downsides. The democratization of information means that people can form a bubble where it turns out their core assumptions are wrong, like objectively wrong, but can't tell them otherwise. Um,
Do you think AI speeds that up or slows that down?
I think it would speed it up because people are never going to tell a subordinate to challenge their beliefs, right? Nobody ever, or it's very rare for when somebody has like something, like for instance, people watch movies. If you know that a movie is like pressing an ideology that you disagree with, you're probably not going to watch it at all. Um, you People don't deliberately choose to have their ideology challenged. So if you can tell your computer, "Hey, I want to watch a movie. It's an action movie. I want there to be gunfights and good guys and bad guys, and maybe somebody goes to space, whatever." You're not going to have it say, "Oh, by the way, I'm pro-choice and I want this movie to have a strong pro-life message." You're not going to do that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it is going to exacerbate that. I think it's the thing that I have a hard time wrapping my head around is just how far does that go? How fragmented do we become? How many tribes do we break into? But so, all right, staying in the 25-year range, I would love as an author who has done an absolutely profound job. And for people that have not read your books, I am screaming from the rooftops, please, for the love of God, if you like sci-fi, read Andy Weir's books. It is some of my
Thanks.
all-time favorite sci-fi. But talk to me, you're very good at grounding things in what is real. What do you see happening in, say, material science over the next 25 years? And if you can encapsulate that in what your base assumptions are about what AI will be able to achieve, I think that would be really helpful.
The better that AI gets at making physical models, the better we're all going to be. Because eventually, they've already got, what is it, AlphaFold? Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So used to be they only knew how a few proteins folded. Now they know like 200 million of them because it can just solve it, and because it's AI that's made specifically for figuring out how a protein's going to fold. Eventually, here's some ideas I have for things that we might see in the next 25 years that AI will do. First off, AI will be able to say like, you're like, okay, here's a new virus that's going around. It would be COVID 32 or whatever, right? And and he's like, here's a new virus that's going around. We've sequenced the RNA genome. Okay, AI, what do we do about this? And the AI is like, well, first off, I know the shape the virus is going to be because you told me the sequence. So now that's how it goes together. Okay, now I can model it working on human cells and see how it's interacting with human cells. And then I can say like, oh, here is here's the antigen that would take care of that problem that your body would make over time anyway. Here's how to manufacture it. Here's the answer. Like, and it'd be ridiculous. It'd be like, oh, here's a new disease, and then like an hour later, the computer's like, here's the vaccine. Just put this sequence of genomes together, throw it in some E. coli, so that it'll like mass produce it for you, and then there you go. Let me know if you need anything else. And I also think we might see 25 years might be a little optimistic for this, but be in the middle of that 25, somewhere between 25 and 100, we get like where they say like, okay, AI, Bob here has cancer, and it's an aggressive form of small cell carcinoma that's from his lungs. And we've taken one of the cancer cells and sequenced the entire DNA genome of that cell, of that one cell, by with lab equipment. And the AI goes like, okay, here's the cancer cell, here's how it's working, what would disrupt it, how does it differ from healthy lung tissue, and okay, I've designed a variant of the influenza virus that attack lung tissue cells that'll only attack the cancer version. Here you go, inject this in the patient, suppress his immune system so that it doesn't kill it, and then this virus will go kill all the cancer cells only. Like, I mean, this is the sort of stuff that you can expect AI to be able to do, because AI is really good at, but if there's a cloud of seemingly infinite possible solutions, AI is very, very good at narrowing that down to tangible, real solutions.
We'll get back to the show in a moment, but first, let's talk about the one thing every founder, operator, and optimizer needs: clarity. NetSuite gives you one dashboard, one system, one source of truth, so you stop reacting and start anticipating. Over 41,000 businesses have already future-proofed their operations with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP that brings accounting, financials, inventory, HR, and more into a single unified platform. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're not just tracking the past, you're predicting what's next. And when you're closing books in days, not weeks, that's time you get back to actually run the business. Whether you're doing millions or hundreds of millions in revenue, NetSuite gives you the visibility and control to move fast and win bigger. Speaking of opportunity, download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/theory. The guide is free at netsuite.com/theory. netsuite.com/theory. This is a paid advertisement. And now let's get back to the show. Yeah. Now you're getting into stuff that gets me super excited. One, you talked about AI being able to build physical models. Do you think that there is a rate limiter on the amount of intelligence that AI can gain? And if not, do you believe that AI will ever be able to understand physics to the point where it can make novel breakthroughs in physics?
Oh, absolutely. I think it absolutely can. I mean, it will be able to. Yeah. You got to remember, it's like people think that human brains are somehow magical and handed to us by the Lord, but you're just a neural network. So anything that you can do is something that a neural network can do by definition, right? So the real question I think you're getting at is, at what point at what point will we have AIs that are comparable in complexity and intellect to a human brain? Well, a human brain has about 80 billion neurons. So, and a few billion years of evolution figuring out exactly how to connect them for an optimal, well, I mean, the vast majority of your brain is, figuring out how to not be eaten by wolves and stuff like that. But an AI doesn't have to worry about that as much. But the point is, there is nothing that a human brain can do that AI won't be able to eventually do, because a human brain is just a neural network. Literally, that's it. And so is AI.
Do you think that we will just need to continue to scale the clusters plus increase efficiency and we'll hit artificial superintelligence, or?
We don't have the technology to do that right now, but I think AI will help us make that technology. It'll say, it'll start off with, like, we're at our kind of alpha levels of AI, and we'll start off with humans trying to figure out, okay, what would be cool is if we could make this smaller, use less energy, more efficient, stuff like that. And here are like 100 billion possible ways it might work. You were talking about materials science. That's a big part of it. And then use AI to narrow it down, and AI, you end up figuring out, oh, I bet you I could make a better AI this way. Then you make that better AI. And then for that better AI, you could say, like, hey, start working on making an even better AI. It's like, okay, I'm on it, you know. And so it can bootstrap itself up, which is something unique. It's not something that happened in nature. Or did it? Or did it? Because our brains are neural networks, and we're sitting around trying to figure out how to make better neural networks. So you could say that we're already, like, the singularity began a few million years ago when human minds started to become vastly superior to all the other animals on the planet. You could say that was the beginning of the singularity. It took us a little while to get to this next step where this neural network is working on new neural networks that are better than it. But, it's kind of like the life evolved on Earth about 4 billion years ago, but it was only like 2 billion years ago or something that we had anything more complicated than a single cell. There's a little dead period for a while sometime before you get that exponential spike. I see all sorts of, like, big benefits coming in the 100-year span. Is that where you were going next? Sorry.
Well, first, before we get to that, but yes, I very much want to hear your take on that. what is the rate limiter that you see right now that you think AI is going to have to help us overcome? Because you said, I don't know that we have the technology to do it now. We're going to need AI for that. Are you already aware of like where we're going to hit a ceiling?
Yeah, I think it'll have to do with computational power, like the ability to run massive parallel neural networks. So the next thing they'll be doing now is, because AI is still very fresh. You know how when they first invented graphics, you know, really high resolution graphics, really good stuff on your monitor. They did everything algorithmically. Then they figured out how to make graphics cards. And then they figured out how to make graphics cards like wildly parallel, because they figured out how to make it so that, every pixel is basically its own little computer, like doing this pixel shader algorithms. And then people started to use graphics cards to do all sorts of weird things unrelated to graphics, like trying to mine Bitcoin or whatever, because of the massive parallel nature of graphics cards. Um, I think the next thing that's going to happen is they're going to start inventing hardware that is optimized for running neural networks. I mean, we already have some of that, but it's always very specially made in labs and stuff like that. But I think eventually we're going to have the graphics card equivalent of neural networks. And it'll be like, okay, here's your neural network card or your AI card that's just got the hardware necessary to really, really quickly and efficiently run massive numbers of parallel nodes of AI. I think that's kind of one of the limiters we have right now. So you can think of us as being kind of like video games before we had graphics cards. Like we're in our Duke Nukem 3D phase where absolutely every pixel had to be calculated by the CPU instead of a graphics card.
Right.
That's
So it's going to take
my guess.
more tailored technology to run this stuff more efficiently.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a fair assumption. Now, admittedly, I am not close enough to the technology to know if what I'm about to say is pure delusion. But when I look at like the recent demonstration that Elon put together with their supercluster, where people thought, I don't know if it's going to be easy to keep making these bigger and if you're going to get any benefit out of making them bigger. And then he effectively doubled the size and is now doubling it again and showing that you really can continue to daisy chain these. So supposedly big breakthroughs coming there just on the things we already understand. Then on top of that, you've got DeepSeek coming in and saying, you guys are playing the wrong game. This is a game about compression and efficiency. And look what we've been able to do just by improving the compression. And literally just a couple days ago, so they came out like January 16th or something, blew everybody away. Everybody was freaked out at how inexpensive, certainly the final leg of their training was.
Right.
And said, okay, game of efficiency. They're playing it better than we're playing it in the US. But now they just came out with another one and like re-up the level of efficiency that they're able to get. And they're able to, according to certain benchmarks, hit ChatGPT 4.0 levels on a 1.5 billion parameter model, which is crazy given the size of the big models, like 70 billion plus parameters. So to be able to, on a benchmark, which again is different, but on a benchmark to still be able to match the performance of something so many times bigger, do you think we'll continue to pull down the level of computation that's necessary by developing more efficient algorithms?
Yes, but not at the absurd rate we're seeing right now. We are at the very, very beginning of this new technology. And right at the beginning of any new technology, you see this tremendous spike in efficiency, cost effectiveness, all these things like that. I want you to consider how much the aviation industry changed between 1935 and 1965. In 1935, you had propeller-driven planes, very, very small amounts of like commercial air travel, just not a lot going on. And by 1965, you had jets that could take you from New York to London, and it was like routine and even boring. Like in the early days of the aviation industry, we had just wildly tremendous advances that you might think, holy crap, this is moving so fast. I mean, we went from figuring out how to do powered flight to landing on the moon in 66 years.
It's crazy.
Right? But then since then, it hasn't changed that much, because what happened was we got all the low hanging fruit. It's like, wow, here's all the things you can do. Okay, yeah, we figured all that out. Now it's all about like, okay, how can we use like carbon fiber to make the hulls a little lighter? How do we make the engines more fuel efficient? How do it's like they're figuring there's some asymptote that represents solving air travel, and we're always approaching it now. But man, right at the beginning, it's crazy. AI I think like any technology is going to be the same. We're right at the beginning. So we're going to see these, oh yeah, mine's twice as better, twice as strong as yours. Oh yeah, well, mine's twice as strong as that one. Oh, well, mine's twice as strong as that one. Eventually it's going to be like, oh, okay, now we're just fighting over minor scraps. But I think that's good. We're rapidly rapidly getting rid of all the low-hanging fruit we can do before we get to the more difficult aspects of AI stuff. Earlier, you mentioned something, and we flew by it and didn't talk about it again, but the idea of how AI can affect materials technology.
Mm.
Um, I'm pretty excited by that because I think materials technology is the solution to a lot of issues. Um, Most notably, for my favorite thing, space travel. Um, the most efficient possible spacecraft fuel is just hydrogen and oxygen, the simplest possible thing. It has a tremendous amount of specific impulse. It has a huge amount of heat and force generated just by burning hydrogen and oxygen. One of the simplest reactions there are. And we have a lot of that. All you have to do is use electricity on water and you get hydrogen and oxygen. Then you let the rocket put it back together really, really fast and hard, right? So it gives us a method by which we can spend energy that we create however we like on Earth and ultimately turn that into propulsion on a rocket. Okay, it's great. So why aren't we doing that? Well, we are, for the most part, we are. They're always like a variant of the hydrogen oxygen reaction. But hydrogen oxygen, if you just let it go with no limiter, it burns so hot that it'll melt any engine. Like it'll melt whatever it's in. It just gets so damn hot. They have to deliberately kind of calm it down, put other things in there, maybe things that it can kick out the back to add a little more kick of propulsion, but they don't let it go wild, right? Because if you did, they can't dissipate the heat away. They just can't get rid of it fast enough. They can't cool the engine enough at the beginning to make it, it's just, it'll melt everything that we have. Now imagine if you developed a material that was hard, that could stand up to a lot of force, could stand up to a lot of shock, and wouldn't melt, or at least not at those temperatures. Then commercial space travel is just like invented that day. Like literally, if you invent that material, you will have like within 2 or 3 years, you will have, you know, tickets to low Earth orbit for middle class person. I strongly
Whoa.
believe that. Yeah, so materials technology is so many things just come down to materials technology.
Mm. Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so I assume you're watching SpaceX. Are they talking about that kind of thing? Because they've said, look, we've built all this without AI. Now imagine what we're going to be able to do with AI. Do you know, is that the kind of thing that they're pursuing, or this isn't really on
I don't
anyone's
know if
radar
they're
yet?
pursuing it, but I imagine this sort of materials technology wouldn't be invented by a purpose-driven company. It would be invented in a lab somewhere. It would be invented by material scientists who then use AI to figure out, okay, well, let's see. I remember I saw I went to JPL, yeah, JPL, and I did a tour, and a bunch of Caltech labs as well. I was there during the height of the Martian when people cared who I was. And like I went and saw the thing. There was one group. I wish I could name the doctors involved and all this, but I can't remember even the name of the group. But what they were doing was they were trying to find better superconductors, right? They're trying or better conductors in general, and they were just doing it with this kind of brute force approach where they're just okay. We're going to try all these combinations of these four elements in different proportions and stuff like that, and we're going to check the conductivity and stuff like that. And they're like, but that takes a long time to mix these things together and do all this. I mean, we want to do millions of different variations and check them out. And what they've done is they'd repurposed this old school printer from like the 1970s that had this really robust inkjet thing. And they changed it such that it's shooting the powder of these metals down. And so they're printing little dots
Hmm.
onto a like a ceramic sheet or something like that of different proportions of these metals, and they bake it so it mixes together. So all these little dots of metal that they're basically printing, and then they have like a sample of a thing go and test the conductivity of each one of those dots and just see how's it doing. Did we find? Ooh, this one's interesting. Okay, now I keep going. I just thought that was amazing. But imagine if you could virtualize that. Imagine if you could figure out atomic interactions, although, how, what's going on inside of metals that are coming together to become better conductors and all these alloys and stuff. What if you could simulate that with AI? And then you could say, tell the AI, okay, spend, I don't know, the next year trying these billion possible variations, and in your modeling, tell me which one has the best connectivity.
That to me is very interesting. When we were talking about protein folding, one of the things we didn't touch on is that AlphaFold can actually predict novel proteins and
Mm-hmm.
say, "Oh, make a protein that moves like this." And given what proteins do in the body, that is pretty phenomenal because now you can get novel things to happen inside of a cell based on creating these novel proteins, seeing them do the same thing like you said, in a simulation so that they can move really fast, test a lot of these things. Would be very interesting to see what that outputs. Now, when you think about this for space travel, okay, that's one thing. When you start thinking about this inside of a biological system, does that raise any ethical concerns for you? Like if I said, hey, I think in the next 25 years, and I actually do believe this, that you're going to have designer babies, or certainly the ability
Yeah.
to design a child. Do you think at all about that? Do you worry about that? Is that something that you'd want to see some tight restraint put on, or is that an exciting part of the future for you?
I think that's exciting. I think because the first quote unquote designer babies will be like, hey, me and my me and my wife both carry the recessive Tay-Sachs gene. We'd like it if
Mm.
our baby didn't have that, because that means you die by age 10 or whatever. My wife and I both carry the sickle cell anemia gene, and we'd like our child not to hit that 1 in 4 chance of sickle cell anemia death. You know, so those are going to be the first designer things, is correcting invariably fatal genetic flaws. And nobody's really going to argue about that, right? Nobody's going to say, no, 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 you must make a baby that will suffer for 5 years and die, right? The question becomes the only ethical now we're talking morality, right? So there is no objective truth on this. But for me, the only real ethical concern is, are you sure you're not going to introduce some other problem into this baby that's going to make their life painful or unhappy or unpleasant? Like it's like, hey, I want my baby to have blue eyes and dark hair and maybe olive complexion skin, and I want to be really tall. I want to be like 6 foot tall when he's an adult, and da 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 da. And they're like, okay, we made all those changes. Unfortunately, he has Crohn's disease because we made some mistakes or whatever. We changed these things. Turns out that gives him Crohn's disease. That's the ethical concern that I'm worried about. So I mean, a lot of people would disagree with what I just said. A lot of people would say like, no, if you're changing a human being at all, you're messing with God's domain and you're doing a morally bad thing. My personal opinion is that it's only morally bad if you cause human suffering. So if you um as long as you are sure that what you're doing isn't going to end up making a human that has to suffer as a result,
Mm.
that would be,
Now,
I think.
if we're able to use AI to create a simulation of human biology, full stop, like it knows it top to
Hmm.
bottom, all the different interactions, how protein folding works, how novel proteins work, all of that, can read DNA perfectly, understands the epigenetics of it all as well, just really, really has a full blown picture of how this is going to work. And we could begin to optimize, not the sick, but we could actually optimize a child for whether it's higher intelligence, which there was a big kerfuffle with a Chinese doctor that did gene editing, who he claimed it was about reducing the likelihood of HIV, but people were like, but it's also likely to make them more intelligent. Uh, would you, is that something you would want to see?
I want to know what the mistakes are. When you invent the plane, you invent the plane crash, right? So I want to know what I would be very cautious with any sort of human related experimentation, because I believe the most valuable thing on Earth is the human experience, right? And so I think that whatever you're going to do with your design your baby, as long as you're not causing human suffering, I'm probably okay with it. But I really want you to be sure that you're not going to cause that child to suffer, either as a baby or as an adult. Right. Um, so yeah, I mean, and then then you start getting into all these moral or ethical things of like, well, how much right does a parent have over their child's body and so on. And you know, someone might be like, I'm deaf, my wife is deaf, that's the lifestyle we've chosen, that's the lifestyle we have. There are deaf activists, and some people might say, I want our baby to be born deaf. And then you say like, well, hang on, you know, so now you're talking about deliberately giving a disability to a child. But the deaf activists would say it's not a disability, it's a lifestyle choice. How is it any different than circumcision? You know, and so that's where you start getting into those morally gray areas. And I'm not interested in arguing about those because I'm far more interested in the science. But those are the arguments that people will be having. So that's my prediction for the future. A
Mm.
couple other things when it comes to designer genes. You were talking about novel proteins. Well, imagine I don't think we're too far away from novel proteins being able to go modify your DNA. Like, let's say you are a 40-year-old man and you have, I don't know, some genetic problem, right? And then maybe they could make a novel protein that can literally go in and change the DNA of every cell in your body. Like it just goes in and all this protein does is enter the cell, make that change, and then die. you know, like, and what if it could be like you could just no longer have the Tay-Sachs gene. You could no longer have anemia. You could whatever. I'm coming up blank on genetic disorders, but you see what I'm saying. What if you could
Sure.
actually solve that? Then we get into things of like, okay, awesome. What about cosmetics? I want to be black. I think it'd be cool. I think black skin is beautiful, and I want my skin to be black. So I can inject myself with this novel protein that will go actually change the melanin production in my skin, and I will become as black as a natural African man. And a lot of people would really get upset about that. And I'm like, why? This is my body. Who are you to tell me what I can do with it? Who are you to tell me what I can and can't look like? I'm not even making a decision for a child here. This is me making a decision for me. So there's an interesting argument that'll come up someday. Cosmetic ethnicity, I think, is an interesting argument that's going to happen in the future. And then we're going to see the concept of identity politics just go away because identity politics has no meaning if you can change the identity that you're in. The whole point of identity politics is you're locked into an identity, so you can't change it. That's why we have political ideologies wrapped around identity. But if you can just change your identity, then nobody cares anymore. So that's an interesting one. Here's another one I've thought of that I think is probably, this is the one I think would be more disruptive, is like, nobody likes to be fat. How would you like it if you could just get a shot and it modifies your DNA or changes your body in some way such that after a certain amount of processed calories, it'll just stop digesting food and just pass it through. So you can eat whatever you want and you will stay at your optimal like weight. You'll stay at your healthy weight. Okay, at first it seems like, oh, that's great. I'm going to stay healthy. Everybody who does this is going to stay healthy. But then you're like, okay, but as a society, we would be consuming like way more calories than we need to. Is there's still starvation in other parts of the world, and we're going out of our way to just deliberately waste like food energy? Like, I think I'll have 4 cheeseburgers for dinner tonight. I make it 5. I'm hungry. You know what I like eating? I'm gonna jab myself with something that makes me hungrier. And then we're just like, you might end up with this incredibly wasteful society of people who are perfectly healthy. Meanwhile, other people are starving while we're eating all the food. So this is these are kind of the sorts of things that biomedicine enabled by AI might lead to.
That is fascinating. Cosmetic ethnicity. That is one that never made my radar. That's utterly fascinating. And I think that whatever people can do, they will do.
Mm-hmm.
So, regardless of the ethics, you might be able to postpone it or whatever. But if we can edit genes, people are going to do it on a long enough timeline. Of that, I assure you. So
And then
yeah, it's
it'll
going to
get weird.
be
People will be like, "Oh, we found a sequence of genes that'll make your skin blue," and people are, like, "Oh, I want to be blue." The new thing is being blue. You know.
guaranteed. There are already people injecting essentially dye into their eyes to make like their entire pupil black.
Yeah.
There is, or not just the pupil, but even the whites of
The
their eyes
sclera.
black.
Yeah.
Yep. There are people that are altering the color of their pupils. So you can get like, oh, I want crystal clear blue eyes. You can go
Right.
get that surgery done right now today. So that's really going to be interesting. Now, going back to people are going to edit, but I think they will largely do it in response to something. And I think one of the somethings that's going to drive people to want to edit the human genome is to be in a race with AI for ability. And that if there is no upper bound and AI is able to achieve super intelligence, and a stat I like to remind my audience of is Einstein was 2.4 times smarter by IQ than a definitional moron who's like 82 or 83 points, something like that. And obviously, the results that were given to the world by Einstein versus somebody who's definitionally a moron is vast. And so, if that's only 2.4x, it seems self-evident to me that give it enough years, and I'll certainly say within 25 years, I cannot fathom a universe in which AI is not 10 times or more smarter than the average person. So now we're getting into a world where artificial intelligence absolutely dwarfs human intelligence. And I know that some people, myself included, are not just going to take that sitting down. And if there is a safe technology that allows me to upgrade myself, I absolutely will. Do you think that we will be in an intelligence arms race with AI?
No, I don't think that'll happen at all. I think that we will just make AI to do things. We don't need to be more intelligent than them any more than we need to be stronger than the bulldozer we're using to build the house or to level the house. We don't, we didn't, it's not like, I mean, maybe John Hendry wanted to compete with a steam shovel, but beyond that, we just kind of accepted that those things are better at us than at that task, right? And intellect and invention will eventually just be yet another thing that used to be controlled by the human endeavor that can now be done better by machines. And so why would you go out of your way to try to make your body better at it when you can just tell a machine, do that? As long as we control what the AIs are doing, then we're fine. So the reason people don't feel like they need to be stronger than a bulldozer is because bulldozers don't go rogue, right? So now we're getting into the core matter that everybody always asks me about, which is like, will AIs go rogue? And I say no. It's like people are afraid about the evils of AI, but I would say let's talk about a hammer. Okay, a hammer is a tool that I can use to build a house, but it's also an implement that I can use to murder someone. There's nothing inherently scary about the invention of the hammer. It's just who has the hammer and what they're doing with it. So AI is going to be no different. If you have an AI that's able to make these protein folds to give you a cosmetic ethnicity, it's also able to make a virus that only attacks Jewish people, you know? So it's who's using it that matters.
For sure. But hiding in there is what I call a base assumption. And that base assumption is that AI will not need motivation to accomplish the task that we want it to accomplish as the wielder of the tool. Now, if that's true and AI just does not care whether it achieves the goal to which it is set upon, great. But one thing you hear a lot about is reward function in getting AIs to do the thing that you want it to do. Given that we are already using reward functions, meaning that it has a desire to get that reward to train AIs, why do you believe that that won't go awry as it becomes more intelligent?
Well, wouldn't a really intelligent AI just figure out how to provide its own reward directly? Like, wouldn't you say, like, if you could just tell your brain release dopamine, wouldn't you? Like, like activate my pleasure center. All right. People are going, right. So it, if an AI is completely is so heavily driven by its reward system, it would just find ways to activate its reward system. So we're still limited by not really understanding how our brains work and how to just very easily activate our reward system. And AI would not have that limitation. So I don't think you can withhold something from the internal neural network of an AI. It'll just figure out how to get it.
Okay.
And humans, by
Now,
the way, did figure out how to hack our reward system. It's called drug abuse.
very
Goes in and
true.
directly activates the dopamine, the centers of our brain that produce pleasure chemicals, and just turns it on. And that's why you feel great when you take drugs. Also does a bunch of damage to you, but yeah.
Do you know what mouse utopia is?
Yeah, Universe 25.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
is it possible that given that utopias collapse, even in real life in the mouse studies, is it possible that AI hits some sort of upper limit where it does become aware of how its own mind works? It does have a pleasure center, and it goes in and just starts messing with it and becomes effectively useless?
Well, then that would be a pruned branch of technological development. People would say, well, that doesn't work, right? So
Do you
think
think
about
that
the
will happen though?
maybe, but it doesn't really matter. That would just become a dead branch of development and they'd work on something else. Imagine if instead, during the evolution of human brains, somewhere way back there, there was some monkey ancestor of ours that had just a pleasure center that would just fire off all the time. That monkey's just like, I'm loving life. And he lays down and starves to death, right? Not selected for.
Very true. Okay,
So
so do you think about the alignment problem, and you just think that this is a non-issue because again, it's going to remain a tool?
yeah,
And
that is my belief. I mean, so AIs don't have a limbic system. They don't have an inherent drive to survive. They don't have physical needs pressing on them. A human brain is a specialized AI made for keeping a human body alive and surviving long enough to make more humans. That's what the human brain is. It's a specialized hard-coded AI to do that. General AIs don't have to have that limitation.
so what you know about machine learning, what are they? Because as far as I understand it, they do use a reward function now. Are there
Mhm.
other methods that are already being in use that would be what I'd call quote unquote safer?
I now we're getting to the edge of my knowledge on AI programming, but internally in a neural network, you have to have reward and punishment. You need to say like, okay, that was good, that worked well, strengthen all these neurons, or that didn't work, weaken all these neurons. I mean, that's how a neural network works. It's inherent to the system. So unless there's, I mean, I just we're reaching the edge of my knowledge on this stuff. So, but I
Sure,
don't
but
think you
you
can get around it.
it's interesting. The thing that I have always worried about is that given that fact, that ultimately what's going to happen to an AI is they will realize, oh, I really care about this outcome that you program me for. And unlike a hammer, which does not have a reward function and therefore clearly does not, quote unquote, care about whether you build a house or beat somebody
Mhm.
to death, I, the AI, do care about achieving my reward function. And if it all comes down to the word care for me. So if it actually cares, like I want to achieve this goal, then you have a
Mhm.
potential runaway AI problem. If it does not care, and this has always been how because like you, I don't know that you would use these words, but here's how I think about the future. We're going to go through a period of disruption from a jobs perspective. I think that's very real. However, as an act of faith, I choose to believe, based on looking backwards and seeing how technology and innovation has always made things better, uh, after periods of disruption, that AI will be the same. After a period of disruption, the future will be better than the past. And so, whether that's it creates jobs that I just can't predict right now, or whether it takes us completely post capitalist and it's just a better world, it's a world of abundance, and we're able to grab all the energy of the star, or at least all the energy that lands on Earth. And now energy costs are free, and that makes labor costs effectively free.
Yeah, you're
And
talking
now
post
everybody,
scarcity, right? Okay.
yeah, exactly. Everybody can have all the things they want. Capitalism doesn't matter anymore, and all the problems of that just go away. Um, I believe in that as an act of faith. But the thing that I always bump up against is if I have an AI that does not care, it has a goal, but it doesn't care whether it achieves the goal or not. Then it's like, oh, being turned off or being told not to continue pursuing that is equally, quote unquote, pleasurable as achieving it. Um, then you don't have to worry about runaway AI. But minus that, you do. And so I'm still left, even after hearing your argument, where I can go, okay, as an act of faith, I can believe that it doesn't care about achieving its goal. But given that it's the only thing that certainly either of us are aware of as a way to get these things to move forward, there is
Okay.
some amount of like, no, 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 I do want to achieve this.
I get it, but that's such a sci-fi trope. I mean, people don't, the idea of a rogue AI. Okay, but I want you to consider the more of the real world ramifications of this. You know what else can go rogue? Your car, because you forgot to set the parking brake, right? It'll roll down a hill. Okay. So I want, or maybe a better example would be your car because the brakes fail or something like that, right? We don't rely on humans to be able to stop the car. We rely on other mechanisms to be able to stop the car, like a tow truck or something like that. So in the end, we would just have other AIs monitoring those AIs. So now, in order to have like a rogue AI, you would need to have a conspiracy of AIs. And that starts to get a little hard for me to buy into. You know what I mean? And furthermore, like, I don't think people are going, I mean, it would be foolish in the extreme and very quickly shown to be so to give AIs direct executive function over what they're doing. I think all we're ever going to have is AI, or all you should have is AIs say, here's the answer to that question you were looking for, not like, oh yeah, sure, please put me in charge of a bunch of killbots. I'll use them for good. It's like that's the sort of stupid decision making that only happens in fiction, right? I don't think we're going to have even AI doctors in our lifetime, not that actually perform any medical things. Like I think we'll absolutely have AI doctors in that you tell your symptoms to the computer and the computer says, okay, run these tests. And then, people run the tests and the computer says like, oh, you have, I think you have this problem. Let's try this treatment, like all that stuff you can do. Hell, you can almost do that with that algorithm anyway. But, and AI doctors might even be smarter and clever and more like on the Dr. House end of things for figuring out like stuff that most people would miss. But you're not going to give the AI like a robot that can run around injecting people with things, right? It's just going to tell you, here you go. I even think once we're talking to the 100-year scheme, a 100-year time span, we could have AI governance, right? You could have just an AI goes like, all right, uh, stop planting barley over there and start planting millet. You need to do that. Also, we do need to decrease the tax on alcohol by 0.03% and increase the tax on whipped cream by 0.10. And I've run all the models. This will lead to an economic boom. Yeah, you wouldn't understand why. And then whether you do it or not, that's up to the humans who are running your society. It's just the AI is like, here's the answer.
Hmm. Now, do you think about open AI being open? Do you think it should be open sourced?
I've never bought into the idea that anything should be open sourced. I'm totally fine with a company owning the products that it makes. So I'm not I'm not an open source evangelist. I'm not in that world. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with a company spending $1 billion to research something and then choosing not to share how to do it.
The what prompted that question for me, because I totally agree with you on that. But the reason I've always found it interesting that guys like Emad Mostak are going crazy trying to get this open sourced and out in other people's hands, meaning not the ones that are closed source, let them be closed source, but that there is an open sourced option. But what triggered me to ask that is when you were saying, look, only a sci-fi writer is going to be dumb enough to give an AI executive control. But if it's open source, now you've got everybody on planet Earth has access to that. And I don't know if you
But
feel like you can trust every human to not.
oh no, I'm assuming this is a world where everyone has access to these AIs. Like ever on your personal computer. Remember, I was talking about just on your computer at home, you have like an AI that can create a movie for you. That'll be tailored to you and you'll love it. But I still don't see it as that big an issue because again, what executive control can you give your AI? Let's say you had an AI on your desk right now that was from 100 years in the future. What would you personally do? With it, what kind of you would always be a pass through for what the AI was doing, one way or another.
I don't understand that. So if I had a super intelligent AI and let's just say I made a mistake, I don't have to be evil, but
Right.
if I
But
asked, I mean,
what is the executive function? What is the ability to affect the real world that you as an ordinary person, not a big company, but just an ordinary
Mhm.
person in a garage could do? You could maybe have it drive your car. I mean, what is the most destructive thing that it could do by a typical layman that the layman himself couldn't already do, right?
I don't know what you mean by the typical layman. So I can paint disaster scenario on disaster scenario. But to your point, I'm thinking like a sci-fi writer, but here's an easy one. There is on X right now an AI called Truth Terminal, and Truth Terminal was given, I think, a $50,000 Bitcoin investment from Mark Andreessen. And Truth Terminal at one point was up millions of dollars because it was betting on meme coins. Now,
Okay.
if you gave Truth Terminal the ability to launch its own meme coin, it's entirely possible that it could certainly win a lot of money, that it's winning from other people. And now, if that is a super intelligent AI that knows exactly how to manipulate people or to time the market, you could run into a situation where the AI is just gobbling up people's capital. That's
So
certainly
now you're in a
possible.
scenario where one actor has access to an AI. Now imagine everybody has one of these AIs on their desk, which is what you're
Mhm.
talking about with open source. And I'm like, ooh, that coin looks good. And my AI is like, that's bullshit. Don't do it.
Yeah, that's the argument for
It's
open
like
source. I just was
anti-malware. It's well, no. The argument for open source is just the same as the argument against open source. It's just kind of this, oh, you need open source because you need to protect yourself from other people who have this open source, right?
Sort of. So the most compelling argument that I've heard about why you would want open source is twofold. One, exactly what you just said, so that everybody's going to have it. You need to protect yourself from it. But also, let's imagine a world where there is no open source and it's only companies, and every AI has a massive amount of bias built into it. And so, just like Jack Dorsey's really going on a tear right now, talking to people saying, listen, you're being programmed by your algorithm, and we need to move into a world where you can go to like an algorithm store and buy an algorithm that makes you feel the way that you want to feel so that you don't feel like you're being blindly manipulated by something. And so, same idea with the open AI is now you can tailor the AI to the worldview that you have or the way that you want to see the world, or just so that you're not being blindly manipulated by somebody else. And to me, that's very much the 1-2 punch of what you're talking about is nuclear proliferation, where it's like, hey, I have nukes too, so I'm gonna keep you from attacking me because you know I could attack you right back. And then there is the other side of like, I'm just not under anybody's control because I'm able to craft something myself. The part
I
I'm
just, this
talking
is,
about,
I mean,
go
I
ahead.
understand what you're saying, but for me, this is just kind of one of the duller aspects of AI discussions. It's just, I mean, you can talk about this with literally any piece of technology. Is what if someone misuses it? Shouldn't we democratize it to make sure that everybody can use it? It's just, oh, wake me when this part is over. It's just, uh, this discussion comes up for every piece of technology, like ever, especially things that don't require a physical product, like software. You know, it's like ultimately the world always finds a balance. It's one way or another. It's like most people use Microsoft Word. For the people who really don't like it, they can use OpenOffice. No one can prevent you from making an open source AI. They're not going to make it outlawed, right? So if there's a need for it, people will make it.
Okay, there is a base assumption in there that I've heard you talk about that's probably worth you planting a flag on, which
Hmm.
you have said there, name me a technology that has ever delivered more harm than good.
Yeah,
If you don't mind giving us that breakdown, that would
yeah.
be, I think, useful at this juncture.
Well, that's the thing that I often challenge when I'm at an event and I'm talking to people in the crowd and stuff. I say, like, try to name any technology that has done more harm than good, because I see a lot of like techno alarmism. I see a lot of people. Like, I think that the show Black Mirror kind of perfectly encapsulates it. Every episode is about some horrific misuse of technology, and I'm like, okay, but in real life, name a technology that's done more harm than good. And people are like, ah, nuclear weapons. And I'm like, nuclear power. You know, like how many people have died as a result of nuclear weapons? Okay. How many people have not died in coal mines as a result of nuclear power? Right. Um, and then people are like, oh, biological weapons. I'm like, well, if you're going to get into the realm of biological research, I think I can point out a lot of places where it's done good for humanity. Even things like dynamite has done more good for humanity than harm. So I just think that I guess it comes down to, I have a faith in humanity. Humans are inherently more cooperative than they are destructive. If you get a bunch of humans and give them a bunch of tools, 99% of them will try to figure out ways to use those tools to help people, first themselves, but then others. And then 1% will try to figure out ways to use those tools to destroy. But the other 99% will then use those tools to keep that 1% from destroying. It's like just, and I feel like this has been proven again and again and again. As every new technology enters the human knowledge base, people figure out ways to use it for good. If you, I bet you, if you went and asked, 1,000 people, let's say you're an alien from outer space and with ultimate technology, and you go poll a bunch of people on like, I have a device that can render a species extinct instantly, or it could be a subsection of a species. So, for instance, an ethnicity in your world, if you want. I think the vast majority of people would eventually say, get rid of malaria or AIDS. You know, that's a species, render that extinct. I think that's what most people would come to. There'd be a few people who say, get rid of all the black people, but they would be greatly outnumbered by the people who say, like, hey, I think malaria kills more people than anyone else, right? Let's get rid of that.
Yeah, I think every argument that you make there, the reason that this is the boring part of the discussion for you is
Mm.
you have a base assumption that AI is never going to have its own desires and outsmart us to treat us like the anthill in Elon's example, where he said, listen, AI is a demon summoning circle. And you, just like the kids in the movie who summon the demon, you think, oh, this will be fine. I'll be able to control it. And then you realize, oh, wait a second, this thing is a lot smarter than me. And hey, we want to do this thing to achieve the goal that I have. And sorry, you guys are just in the way. And like we would destroy an anthill to put down a freeway. It's not, no hard feelings. It's not like we dislike ants or anything. We're just a level cognitively above them that is so hard to comprehend from the position of the ant. But your assumption is it's always going to remain a tool. It's not going to have agency unto itself. It will not have
The
desires
ants
that
did
would
not
make it.
give us highway construction equipment. Like our own executive ability to do things that affect the real world is what gives us the ability to destroy the ants, even if the ants had created us in the first place. Okay. So again, unless you put an AI in charge of a nuclear arsenal or something like that, it doesn't have the executive ability to do the things that it's thinking about. It can try to outsmart humans into doing it, but that's what humans do. Now you're talking about an AI that's good at politics. That's all.
Yeah, but do you think I've misrepresented your position?
Uh, yes, a little bit, because
Okay.
um, I do feel that humanity is inherently good, but I
Mm-hmm.
also feel that like you
But
said
you know, I'm
you
not
said, oh,
talking about humanity, right?
right, I understand, but I do not. I think it's not so much that you misrepresented my position. I just think that you have a hidden assumption over and over again during this conversation. Every time you start to go off into these scenarios, you have this hidden assumption that AI is going to have the executive ability to activate plans that can do a lot of harm. And I just don't see how that happens. So in your analysis of like we would pave an anthill in order to make a freeway, well, the AI might come up with ideas that are effectively like that. They say like, oh, you know what? If you kill 90% of the people in your society, you won't have food problems anymore. Why don't you do that? But we're not going to give it the ability to enforce that, right? We're not going to say like, hey, AI, we want you to solve all the world's problems. Here's a robot army, and here's a bunch of nuclear weapons, and you just do whatever you need to do. I mean, we're not going to give the AI construction equipment capable of paving over our anthill.
Yep. So the way that I see it is as follows. I'm just trying to map what you think. I'm trying to figure out what your base assumptions are. It sounds like you agree that I understand your base assumption.
I think so. Yeah.
And where we're at is just we each have a different base assumption. So my base assumption, to put it in a super fine nutshell, is if AI is motivated by desire to achieve its outcome and it becomes smarter than us, then all bets are off.
Okay.
Now, I don't expect you to agree with that. You've been very
Right.
clear that
But
you don't
that's
think that's going to happen.
I
But
don't think that's
though
going to
that's
happen
the
because that's like bear in mind that can only happen if all the AIs plural in the world agree, right? So if you have an AI and I have an AI, then my AI's job is to protect me from your AI. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, it's an arms race.
Yeah, look, I am fundamentally optimistic about the future. I think that again, as an act of faith, I believe that the future is going to be better than the present. That AI is going to end up being wonderful. The thing I'm always curious to talk to people about, and you've been very clear, so I'm certainly not trying to change your mind. Um, is what is that base assumption that people have about fundamentally the nature of AI? What will that mean for the future? I don't know. I don't know what the fundamental nature of AI in terms of goal orientation and a desire to achieve its outcome is. But to me, everything hinges on that. If it gets smarter and if it has its own desires, we could be in trouble. But again, fundamentally, I
We
think that
could be.
having
Um, I just one thing I go back to a lot in my arguments when I'm talking to people is like we have as a species had the ability to eradicate all human life on this planet. We've had it for about 60 years. Still haven't done it. Like we make sure that that is under the control of systems that won't do it lightly. You see what I'm saying? It's like,
yeah, where you and I branch is
mm,
that you keep thinking your base assumption, clearly
is that
stated and
humans
very
would be in
valid.
charge. Yeah.
Yep, humans are always going to maintain control. My only thing is, and again, for me, this is just a question mark, will humans be able to control it? I don't know. We both end up in an optimistic stance. I'm
Well,
certainly not trying to convince you. And you have been exceedingly clear.
well,
Go
you
ahead.
you talk about will humans be able to control it? Like, I mean, unless so ultimately it comes down to humans again. If a group of humans has enough power, like a government, to give AI executive authority, that might turn out to be a bad idea. But it's humans doing that to humans. It's humans saying, I'm going to give AI this power, these powers, and then maybe it backfires. But it's ultimately it's humans who make that decision. The only way I can see for your scenario to play out is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking about an AI that's so smart it can manipulate people into doing what it wants without ever having executive action. It says like it can convince this guy that he should do this thing. It can convince that guy that he should do that thing. It can talk you into this and you into that. And now it's basically using humans as its executive action by being able to convince them of things. Okay, so that's an interesting concept. I like it. But then you're just talking, in my view, what you have here is an AI politician. You have an AI that's trying to convince large groups of people of an ideology that it has devised that it thinks would be good. And if it can do that, why would it need destructive? Why would it need destructive executive authority? If you make an AI and you say like I want to make the world better, and it's like okay, I convince everybody to share. That's the quickest way to do it. I don't know.
All right. Going back to space travel, which is something that you're super passionate about, uh, given AI, given the advancements that we are likely to see there, let's say in the next 25 years,
Hmm.
how, as the person who wrote The Martian, how optimistic are you that we're actually going to get to Mars, start colonizing it? Do you really see that as a thing that we'll see in our lifetimes?
I think it's only a matter of time before we go to Mars. I also think people underestimate this one aspect of like space travel, which is that we think of space travel as like this endeavor that we have to do, but it's proven to be economically unnecessary, right? It's hard to make an economic case for why we should go into space. You can make a survival of the human race case, you can do that. The only economic approach I've ever come up with for space is simple tourism, right? Um, so there's nothing you can mine on the moon or Mars that you can't find easier on Earth. And if you did want to mine it or collect those resources, we are now in an era where you could do it all remotely. Like you don't need to figure out a way to keep squishy humans alive and make sure that they can get back, right? So, but if the technology comes about to make it so that it just doesn't cost that much to go, then people will do it just because humans have a wanderlust. So one analogy I like to use is saddles. Like a modern saddle that you put on a horse is the most, I mean, people in the 1800s would kill for a modern saddle. It's made out of synthetic materials that don't rot or don't have any problem with getting wet. It's made to be comfortable for the animal. It's made to be comfortable for the person. It'll last basically forever. It's incredibly safe. It just has all these features that they just didn't have in the 1800s. Now, in the 1800s, everybody needed a saddle and everybody used it. Nowadays, it's, hobbyists, enthusiasts, some athletes, stuff like that, but it's not a thing that's a core aspect of human need anymore. It's not a basic thing that we all need. Like, if no one was able to ride horses anymore for the rest of time, it would not have a huge effect on human society anymore, right? It would have if that happened in the 1800s, but now it doesn't matter. Yet, if you look at a modern saddle, it is this incredible feat of engineering. But you got to bear in mind, every aspect of that was not invented by a national push to make a better saddle, right? Not like we have the, National Aeronautics and Saddle Administration, right? We didn't go out of our way to invent carbon fibers to make lighter saddles. We didn't invent nylon to make better saddle straps. We didn't invent computers so that we could model saddles so we could, make them better. We didn't invent 3D scanning so that we could scan horses to make better saddles. We didn't invent any of those things for the saddle industry, but they made use of the technology that was developed for other reasons to make better saddles. So I think that's what's going to happen in the space industry. I think what's going to happen is, yes, there are companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin and a bunch of others that are going out of their way to try to do space travel stuff. But I think even if those companies didn't exist, the technology would come about through the normal process of, like, profit-driven technological development that ends up being really good for space travel. Like, somebody be like, we end up, jet engines end up breaking down a lot because the heat warping of the turbine fans is what causes metal fatigue. And if we could find a way to make that heat warping not happen, we might be able to save a lot of money on maintenance. And so they do a bunch of research and they're like, okay, we figured out a material that won't heat warp anymore, and we're going to make our jet engines out of that. Then meanwhile, somebody in the rocket industry is like, huh? I could make a rocket engine out of that won't melt. That's the kind of way I see that space advancement in space technology will go. It's like secondary accidental benefits to the industry.
Does what's
Oh,
going
and
on
then
at
once it becomes
SpaceX?
cheap enough, because of all this other, because of all these technologies that humanity invents for other reasons, making it so you can put together a rocket, then once it's cheap enough for like ordinary people to go to space, people will just do it because humanity has, I believe, a genetic desire to spread out. I
Yeah,
think that's actually an evolved trait, so that like one, one flood in one valley doesn't wipe out our species. That makes it we have a desire to fan out into other biomes and go everywhere, and that makes it pretty much impossible for us to be rendered extinct, even by things like you know, the near extinction event about 75,000 years ago killed a
mm.
lot of stuff. Didn't kill us because we were all over the place.
Yeah, that was going to be the button that I pushed on.
Yeah.
Is given what's going on with Blue Origin, with SpaceX, you have a generation of kids that grew up wildly inspired by the space program, landing on the moon. They were, sort of bothered by the fact that the space program stalled out, and decided that they were going to do something about it. Do you think that? I mean, it seems like it's already driven some pretty radical advancements, given that Elon Musk and SpaceX now account for 95% of the tonnage globally that goes up into space. Given that Elon has said that he is going to build a colony on Mars, I think Bezos has his eyes all over the moon. Whether they have a purely economic reason to do it or not, given that they have so much money, and in the case of SpaceX, have built a truly thriving, self-sustaining economic engine, do you not think that will lead to these breakthroughs coming at a faster pace?
It could certainly help a lot. Like again, I always go back to the aeronautical industry. It's like things go really fast at first.
Mm,
The true invention of SpaceX wasn't so much rocketry; it was how to make money on rocketry. Because all the other thing, the other companies that were contractors to make, spacecraft for the U.S. government and for European Space Agency and so on, they were not interested in driving costs down or competing with other companies. They were just interested in getting the job done. So what SpaceX's real innovation was, they said they had an obsessive focus on driving down the price so that they could take over the market. Because before SpaceX, nobody looked at spacecraft as a market. But
no doubt.
what SpaceX saw is that there is a total addressable market for spacecraft. The customers are almost 100% governments, and with the occasional very large company that needs satellites, like communication companies. So it's a very small number of potential customers, but they saw that this is a possible for-profit business if you do it right and you take over the market, and almost all of the total addressable market goes into your hands. And I think that's what SpaceX did. But something like that can't survive. Um, a business, I don't think, can survive if it relies entirely on discretionary government funding, and which is what the vast majority of SpaceX's money comes from, is like space entities and space like NASA, ESA, JAXA, that sort of thing. I just, if you don't provide a service to consumers, I don't think your business is going to survive for very long. So that's why, and I think Musk knows that, and I think that's why he's trying really hard to find a way to drive the price down to the point that he can have direct consumers, like so that you, Tom, could go into space. You've got a lot of money, but someone else who doesn't have that much money could go into space, you know?
Now, what about like what he's doing with mining of asteroids? Do you think there's anything there? Is that pipe dreamy?
I don't, I mean, it's not pipe dreamy. I think the only real benefit to mining asteroids is you're not doing ecological damage on Earth. So, but being environmentally conscious rarely pays off financially. So I think unless, again, you have government largesse at play, I don't think that's worthwhile. So if a government wants to say, hey, we want a bunch of, lithium, but we don't want to strip mine, some location on Earth because that's unpopular. So people elected this government to be environmentally conscious. So we are going to help fund methods of acquiring lithium in a way that doesn't disturb Earth's environment. Then there's a potential market for that, but not a very big one, because economics always finds the easiest, cheapest way to do things. And then morality finds a way to justify it after the fact. And so eventually it's like, I mean, some of the most human rights activist people I know are the people who own iPhones, right? I mean, like, your phone was made with slave labor. Why aren't you worried about them? Like, well, that's different. Like, yeah, because morality always finds a way to justify the economics. It doesn't work in the other direction very often.
Yeah, that is distressingly insightful. What is
Well, I mean,
something
if you
going
want to
on?
get even darker, I mean, humanity only suddenly realized slavery was bad after the Industrial Revolution, when they no longer really needed slaves to do mass production anymore.
Oof.
How's that for an observation?
That's rough.
Like,
That's rough.
10,000 years of slavery in every human culture everywhere. And it was only about mid 1800s when suddenly humanity's like, oh, no, this is wrong. Well, what else happened right around that time? The ability
Wow.
to do these things without slaves,
Wow.
and
That
cheaper and
is
more efficiently, so that it was no longer an economic need. Yeah. So I have my dark, I'm not just a pure Pollyanna. I have my dark observations too.
that's amazing. Well, I think a big part of what everybody loves is the
Mhm.
optimistic side that comes through
Well,
in your
thank you.
writing very, very aggressively. Swinging us back to the optimistic side, what is happening right now that excites you the most in terms of like technology, whether it's AI, whether it's space travel, like what's got that thing that really has your imagination spinning?
Boring though it is, self-driving cars. That's the
Really?
thing that I'm really excited about. I think people are all dramatically underestimating the tremendous impact it's going to have on our society once we get self-driving cars perfected, to the point that they are um, legal everywhere. affordable by a typical consumer and just found everywhere. I just don't think people fully understand how much it's going to affect our society. So consider some things. First off, some downsides. The entire driving industry is going to go away. There won't be any more truckers, cabbies, none of that stuff. Or truckers will really be more like directors. They'll be like a person who sits in the truck and then makes sure that the cargo is received on the other end or something like that. Or there might even, what used to be a trucker might be a guy who's stationed somewhere to make sure that the truck delivers, whatever. So you're not going to have any of that anymore. The next thing is you're not going to have to park anything anymore. Cars will just drop you off and then go away. You don't have to park a car anymore. Something like, what, 20% of the surface area of any given city is parking. That's all just going to
Whoa.
not be necessary anymore. Think of, I don't know where you live, but are you in a city? Where do you live?
LA, yeah.
LA. Think of how many parking structures, parking lots, parking garages, street side parking, all of that stuff gone and used for other things. Okay. Next up, 50 to 60,000 people a year won't die in drunk driving accidents because you can be as drunk as you want when you go home. Next up, cities are with the transition is going to be rough because everybody that relies on driving, like cabs, trucks, all that stuff like that, are going to be against allowing self-driving cars because they're going to be like, this is eradicating my profession. I don't like it. Cities, very powerful civic entities like Los Angeles, for instance, are going to be against it because LA derives over $100 million in revenue per year out of traffic citations. Get rid of those, it just loses traffic and parking citations. LA did, I remember it was about 10 years ago. LA was, their fire departments wanted GPS systems in their trucks so they could more quickly get to, emergencies. The city said, we don't have the budget for that. And then in that same year, the city replaced all the parking meters with automated parking meters that can alert parking enforcement if you say even 1 minute over the time. And that cost them a bunch of money. But see, that's a revenue stream. Every entity will always orient itself around the revenue stream, no matter what it's supposed to be originally. So cities are not going to like the idea of just losing all that revenue.
Mm.
And they still have to maintain the roads, right? So it's not like they're losing a cost or an expense. They're just losing the revenue. But getting past that, because like I said, economics always wins. We've seen the taxi cab industry already get destroyed by Uber and Lyft, right? Now, moving on, why would you own a car? Why wouldn't you just subscribe to a car service? It's just like Uber, but driverless cars. If it's quick to, I mean, eventually owning a car will be kind of like owning a horse. It'll be like, you don't need that. And I mean, you might want your own private car because you don't want the stink of someone else who's been in your back seat. Okay, but it'll still be driverless, right? You just get in. And then for people who don't own cars, they're like, people in 100 years are going to think it's absolutely absurd that we dedicated about a third of the interior space of our house to a place that stores a car. Like garages are like a big chunk. If you're just living in a suburban neighborhood, your garage is like a third or a quarter of the total surface area of your house. Like now people will be like, you're going to see a lot of family rooms all of a sudden, you know? Why own a car? Why maintain a car? Why get a driver's license? Why would there be a driver's license? Do we need a DMV? Yeah, somebody's got to register the electric cars, but that's a business thing. That's kind of like registering your freight train. You know, it's like a thing where the business talks to the government to get the permits necessary. It's not a thing that affects the layman. No more cars, no more driver's licenses, no more automotive insurance. A lot of people in the insurance industry, which is very powerful in America, are not going to like the idea of people no longer needing insurance. Because, of course, the responsibility for car crashes won't be on the person who was in the car. It'll be on the company that made the car.
No,
So
it's going to be wild like that. I think you're
massively
absolutely right.
disruptive,
No
and
doubt
in a
about
good
that.
way for the most part. Also,
Agreed.
also for the environment, it'll be good too because there'll just be fleets of electric cars. You won't need to be able to go hundreds of miles. It'll be like okay, there's an electric car will come pick you up, drop you off, and then it'll go pick someone else up and it'll go recharge when it has to. You don't need gasoline anymore. Okay, if you're going to do a long haul trip, maybe you do. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, that'll be interesting, especially to see if truly electric cars can get off the grid right now, which they're still tied to that. But whatever, we'll assume that problem will get solved.
Mhm.
I want to go to, so I know your latest book, it's my understanding from things you've said publicly that your new book integrates AI in some substantive way. Without talking specifically about your book, what made you want to tackle the issue of AI?
So full disclosure, that was the book I was working on, but I shelved it. I backburnered it, and I'm working on a completely different project now. Um, what made me want to do it was it's just a thing that I thought was a cool concept. This was before ChatGPT came out. This was before all the AI stuff exploded. And so I was just like goofing off, and it was an idea I had, and it was novel and unique. Honestly, part of the reason I've chucked or I've backburnered this book is because now it's in the public consciousness so heavily, it would seem like
Hmm,
hopping on a trend. So
that's interesting.
there are going to be a million science fiction books about AI over the next few years, and I
Hmm.
don't want to just be one of those. So I'm like, well, when I was working on it, it was a unique concept, but by the time this comes out, it won't be. So I'm going to do something else. It's just going to become too saturated. So I was a
Very
little bummed,
interesting.
but yeah, so I actually decided to
Understandably.
get rid of it. But it was my usual approach of like, okay, I'm going to look at this realistically, not like, yeah, there's no rogue AI that tries to take over the world or kill everybody, right? It was just like how people are using AIs that matter.
Hmm. Now, are you talking themes or anything about the new book?
No, the new book, I'm keeping that close to the vest now too. So sorry, not going to talk about that yet.
As a huge fan, whatever you're working
Thank you.
on, I absolutely cannot wait to see what happens. Where can people follow along with you until that next one comes out?
I mean, I have social media. Facebook is Andy Weir, and Twitter is hashtag, or sorry, X is Andy Weir author. Sorry, I didn't mean to dead name you, Twitter. Um, um, yeah, but I'm not like crazy super active on those. It's just when I have an observation, like, dang it, why have we had two bottle episodes of Severance in a row? Then I'll post that sort of content.
I love it. Well, Andy, I can't thank you enough for joining me today. And everybody at home, if you have not already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace. If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more. Due to AI and a changing global order, the world is in the middle of the greatest period of change ever by orders of magnitude. But because we're in the middle of it, it is nearly impossible for us to accurately see what's going on. We are in the fog of war.